Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to the second part of, What If Toshiro Hitsugaya Was Sent to Hogwarts?
Chapter 4. Sorting Things Through. Several hours ago on Hogwarts Express. A whitish figure darted from the back of the train into the night sky as the figure settled upon the train, his snow-white hair noticeable in the growing twilight of the night, if you were dead that is. Having placing a keto barrier over himself, Toshiro flipped open the white and silver soul phone, having just finished sending his report of several paragraphs, sure that the head captain would have questions for him to answer to directly, despite having sent Kurohana for his new orders. Captain Hitsugaya? The commanding voice of the head captain sounded as Toshiro replied swiftly. I presume the mission is progressing well. Yes, sir. I have boarded the train en route to the school. I presume that Urahara has taken the textbooks for Kyoraku and Yukataki to read over and add to our information on these wizards. Considering the captain had little to do, Toshiro visited Diagon Alley once again, purchasing all of the textbooks from the 4th to 7th year, having finished the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and half of the 6th respectively. Yes, they were most informative. However, seeing as we are incapable of magic as you are not, they are of little importance. You are to continue to act as a student and interfere into their affairs as little as possible, Captain Hitsugaya. We have just refreshed our ranks, we do not need to include ourselves into another war. Yes, sir. Yukataki Taicho also has requested you play along with Headmaster Dumbledore's questions, seeing as the professor is aware of your position as a high rank equal to Yukataki Taicho. Is it under the system and cover that Urahara had sent me? Quote. Yes. You are to under no circumstances other than no choice, to reveal your true identity, Captain Hitsugaya. Yes, sir. And with a sharp click of the phone, the conversation was done. Even though the head captain held all of his captains in high esteem, respect, and care, as they were the military, they were still his subordinates, therefore, emotions and things like feelings were irrelevant for the most part as they placed their lives in risk on a daily basis. Replacing the phone in his pocket, Toshiro sighed as the wind billowed his white snowy hair, the cold centering over the boy as he materialized his zanpakuto into his hands, the long katana and the star-shaped hilt fitting rather oddly in the child captain's hands, as he sat, his position one of utter ease despite the roaring winds from the speeding train under him. Master. In his inner world, the child captain merely nodded as his dragon zanpakuto disappeared from the icy wasteland for a moment, only to reappear with another accompanying him. As Hyarinmaru took a protective stance over his master, the captain took in the sentient being within his wand. Whether it was to be a weapon or a mere asset to a disguise, the captain had yet to gauge. The dragon was young, and relatively smaller than that of his kind, seeing as he was no bigger than Hyarinmaru in his materialized Shikai. His hide was a bony white, angularly sharp scales covered his neck and claws. From his head down his spine to the tip of his tail, spikes protruded with the glint of icicles, his icy blue eyes glowing with an arctic frost as he two-eyed the captain. With a piercing roar, rows of menacing fangs gleamed as his wings extended, a transparent white and bat-like in characteristic. Are you, Toshiro Hitsugaya, my chosen master? The youngling addressed the captain as Toshiro narrowed his teal orbs. I am. Seeing as you have chosen me to wield your external self. Toshiro spoke as the youngling bowed his stance, acknowledging the captain. It seems that I have chosen well, having awaited all these years for the correct master. Tell me, how is it that you have sentient consciousness and the other wands are merely a halving of yours? Toshiro asked, his voice not kind yet not condescending as the white dragon folded his wings and nestled in the snow, his icy blue moon orbs saddened with grief and pain. I am Sephiroth, and abandoned and the last of my kind, the Fleur. I was born as one of the most powerful hatchlings, however, was outcasted due to my power and white hide unlike my brothers and family's black ones. It was not until I had barely matured that I had known of this, only to discover that my family was slaughtered by dragon hunters, along with my kind having deemed us too dangerous. How dare those humans? Hiranmaru roared angrily as Toshiro calmed his Zanpakuto, his own anger and fury reflected in his teal eyes along with a glimmer of sympathy for the youngling. These events have already taken place, Hiranmaru. There is little we can do but accept that it had passed and move on. The captain said as he allowed the snow of the inner world to blanket the three of them, eyes encouraging the younger dragon to continue. My elder brother had survived, at the expense to his right wing. But still he was still strong enough to kill me. The young dragon seemed to whisper as he found himself before the ice captain who merely watched with his sympathy and pity in his teal eyes, his Zanpakuto doing the same as the youngling continued. I had requested a wand maker to forge a wand before my death, to use my heartstrings and thestral hair, seeing as my brother had blamed our family's death on me as I had later learned that he had hurtled himself into the cliffs shortly after my own death. And I presume that you are sentient due to the amount of heartstrings forged in the you? His new master had drawn, the dragon nodded. And these thestral hair? They are beings of death, invisible to all but those who have seen death, accepted it, and have internalized it as a part of their own past. Clever, ominous, and known as a bad omen, they were among the few creatures that were kind to me, having the highest level of loyalty to me as I was to them. However, that is besides the point. A raised eyebrow was all he had gotten from his master, eyes narrowed once again. Thestral tail hair is an unstable and powerful substance. Only a wizard of great power and one that had seen death is able to wield it to its fullest potential. However, the nature of a thestral is to be ambiguous of its master, just as death is ambiguous to its victims. However, that is where I come in. I see. Hiranmaru spoke up after a while, the serpentine dragon having curled at his master's feet, his head under his small hands. Through you and your heartstrings, you counteract this nature with the nature of dragons, absolute loyalty. Yes, however, Toshiro must prove to me just as you have, Elder, that he is worthy as it is in the nature of a dragon when he submits to a master. The youngling spoke as he addressed the elder dragon. I will not interfere. Hiranmaru declared as he was well aware of the youngling's pride, it was all the young one had left. However, only if my master would concur. Very well, Sephiroth. Toshiro accepted as he opened his teal eyes in the conscious world, deemed that he had disappeared for long enough. We shall address your tests for me at another time. Sephiroth, you may reside with Hiranmaru within the caverns of my inner world, as Hiranmaru regards you as no threat. My thanks. The white dragon growled rather pleasantly, as the two dragons watched their master and to be master disappear with a snowy wind, leaving behind only soft footfalls as evidence of his presence. After declining the offered chocolate from the werewolf professor, Toshiro changed into his robes, the emblem of his robes yet to appear, wrapping his teal scarf around his neck. The other three followed in suit as they watched the train come to a stop, this time, at the correct destination. Toshiro watched as first years en routed a different way with a rather large man, in his hands a lantern and an umbrella, as he hollered for first years to follow him towards the lake. The man was toweringly tall and large, a long mane of shaggy black hair consisting of his beard and head, obscuring a majority of his face. However, a warming and kind fire burnt in the man's dark chocolate orbs, making this man remind the captain of Jidanbo, the gatekeeper of the west gate of Seiradi. Rain pelted the children as the older years boarded carriages towards the distant castle of Hogwarts, the captain following in suit as the trio beckoned him aboard. It was impressive, the captain had to admit, as the castle loomed over a lake, spurring towers, extensively large grounds, a large field with stands and poled rings, flowery and vegetable-filled patches of greenery littered the grounds as the students neared the castle. Soon enough, all the students were climbing the stairs into the dining hall, when a familiar gray tabby caught the captain's attention. As if motioning with her tail, the animagus form of the stern professor turned, making her way through the corridors. With an eventuality of turns and twists, the white-haired captain had found himself in Dumbledore's private office, having entered through the Golden Eagle in the password that Professor McGonagall had supplied, Sherbet Lemon. Wonderful. There was seated the headmaster himself, and standing behind him to his right, was Flitwick, perched on a large stack of books, and Snape, with who Hermione had described to a T, Professor Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff House and the herbology professor, followed by McGonagall who joined the four, as the captain narrowed his eyes warily but adding a twinge of fear for good measure to keep his ruse. Headmaster, Professor Snape, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, and from my own understanding, Professor Pomona Sprout, head of Hufflepuff House and head of herbology. Toshiro greeted as he bowed to the five, his eyes steely. What do I owe for this occasion, if I may? Quote. As perceptive as ever, Mr. Hitsugaya. Dumbledore smiled warmly. Yes, this is indeed who you say she is. Toshiro Hitsugaya, Professor. Toshiro nodded with a glance to the slightly startled woman but smiled heartily all the same. In the means of the silence, Professor Lupin had arrived, casting a rather concerned look at Toshiro, taking a stand by Snape and Flitwick. And this is Professor Remus J. Lupin, the defense against the dark arts professor. Dumbledore smiled as Toshiro narrowed his eyes. Yes, we were acquainted upon arrival, Headmaster. Seeing as Professor Lupin is a werewolf. Flinching at the reveal of his secret, the said professor looked at the boy with surprise, Professor Sprout and Flitwick doing the same only towards the professor. As sharp as ever, Mr. Hitsugaya. Yes, Professor Lupin is indeed as you say a werewolf, but I ask you to keep this a secret as the prospect of a professor as a werewolf disheartens some. Dumbledore asked, his smile still warm yet mysterious. Responding with a swift nod, Toshiro had half a mind to ask the man to spit it out already, but held his tongue. As the students are being sorted into the dining hall, we would like to inquire in a topic discussed between your father and myself, Mr. Hitsugaya. Oh? Toshiro drawled, playing ignorance. Yes, he had said that you would inform me upon my questioning, seeing as how we were both unaware of each other's significance until your grandfather had contacted us. The headmaster held a curious, mischievous, and slightly guarded glint in his eyes, glowing with anticipation and glee at the prospect of a student on par with his conversations. A short silence enveloped as Toshiro sighed silently, his teal eyes regarding the slightly defensive heads of houses, surrounding their relaxed headmaster. Very well. I shall inform you of the society of which is my own. However, not a word out of this office, Professor Dumbledore. And if you should force my hand, the results would not be kind. Toshiro warned, his teal eyes boring over the 6 professors, the headmaster unflinching as he heartily agreed with the professors surrounding him watched with apprehensive eyes upon the child before them. With a swift turn, the white-haired captain flicked out his wand from his boot, the professors and headmaster flinching at the sight of the wand. Cala portis. Fianto duri. Impervious. The captain chanted, as he executed the spells with masterful skill, ending his spells with the imperturbable and intruder charm, respectively, before turning to the slightly impressed professors as he replaced his wand. Toshiro began as he held out his right hand, summoning the smallest bit of healing Kido in the palm, the soft glowing green light astonishing the professors. This is the magic in which we exercise in the East. We call this Kido, and from it, we have 3 subcategories. And these 3? Dumbledore asked, having recovered the first, fascination glowing behind his half-moon glasses. Hado, Bakudo, and Healing Kido, which you all see before you. Only those who possess magic in their bloodline or are spiritually aware, are able to harness this magic and use it for defensive, healing, and offensive purposes. Toshiro explained as he ceased the glow, eyes stealing for inevitable questions. Are there incantations for this Kido? Professor McGonagall questioned, her eyes curious behind square spectacles. Yes, Professor. 99 for Bakudo and Kido, with 50 for healing. However, they are of much longer length of your own spells, Professor. Ours consist of 2 or if not, several sentences, chanted in a certain manner. If not executed properly? The consequences would be? Snape inquired, his eyes domineering. Death. In the worst-case scenario. Hitsugaya supplied bluntly, his face betraying no emotion other than acceptance of this fact. Failing in completion or mispronouncing may backfire the spell, thus the cause of explosions and in certain cases, death, as it is not an uncommon occurrence in my society. Surely, they have safety regulations and a protection for this? Professor Sprout urged, her concern for the white-haired child obvious and overbearing in the captain's opinion as Flitwick voiced his own concerns, only more specifically. Mr. Hitsugaya, you are not speaking of personal experience of this, are you? The short professor inquired as the 6 professors met gazes with the captain's teal ones, giving them all the answers they needed. The society in which I originate from is a militaristic one, professors. If one is unable to survive, then they are simply unfit to continue. Such is the policy of my society. Toshiro said, in a matter-of-fact tone, cold and emotionless as he continued despite the concern and pitying eyes of the professors, even Snape's glinting a sliver. Our system is one run by 13 individuals, one above the other 12, my grandfather and superior, the head captain. And below him, are the mentioned 12 or captains who command a regiment of men and women who are capable of Kido. Toshiro said, as he regarded the professors with a cold and expressionless glare. The head captain is my grandfather, who I address by his title. You say that your society is run by these 13 captains? Dumbledore asked, his demeanor still gentle and friendly. Yes, they are the pillars of stability in our society as they command over a regiment of about 200 men. Within these men and women, there are seats from 3rd to 10th, the former being the highest other than a captain or a vice-captain, the latter being the lowest other than unseated men. Toshiro elaborated, that much having been approved to allow the wizards to be informed. And if I were to recall correctly, your father has informed me of being a captain himself. Dumbledore drawled as if he were speaking of the weather as the professors regarded him pointed looks. And of the 13th Division, if my memory serves. Correct. Just as my grandfather is of the 1st Division. Toshiro replied, not missing the piqued curiosity in the professor's eyes at his own ranking. And of your own ranking, Hitsugaya? Snape asked finally, his voice soft yet lined with slight respect. You have hinted at your society being militaristic and relentless to the weak, so we must expect it to be one of high ranking. A 10th seat, perhaps? Quote. Incorrect, Professor. I am regarded as Captain Hitsugaya Toshiro of the 10th Division, or in your terms, Captain Toshiro Hitsugaya. The said person allowed himself a light smirk as the professors took on stupefied expressions with Dumbledore's with slight surprise. Then you are of equal rank towards your father, Mr. Hitsugaya? McGonagall asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Yes, in the society in which I originate, age and size are of trivial matters. Capabilities and prowess in battle are the only things in which we are concerned over in the aspects of our people. Toshiro supplied as he blatantly ignored the professors before him. The world of Soul Society was harsh, and there was no point in washing over it. How extraordinary. Dumbledore breathed as the other professors nodded rather dumbly, their surprise still unfazed. These incantations, as I see it, Mr. Hitsugaya, are they only limited to the Japanese language? Quote. Yes, as yours is limited to Latin and German roots, headmaster. Toshiro nodded as he watched the headmaster stand, and walked to the front of his desk, a hand outstretched to the captain. Are you aware of the 4 houses of Hogwarts, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. A swift nod toward the headmaster was the captain's response as the said wizard revealed a ragged and stepped on, multiple times at that, hat. This is the sorting hat, which will speak to you, deciding which house you shall be placed in. I see. Will I have a choice in the matter? The captain asked as he was gestured to take a seat, Flitwick having conjured one. I am afraid that is for you to decide, Mr. Hitsugaya. Dumbledore smiled mysteriously as he placed the hat upon the captain's head. Feeling rather foolish with a pointed hat on his head for more than a minute, the captain reached up to yank the filthy thing off when a scraggy and hoarse voice spoke, the captain awakening in his inner world. Above the captain with Sephiroth and Hiranmaru by his side was the sorting hat, his voice echoing in the harsh and howling winds of the snowstorm. A soul reaper, eh? I must say in my years of sorting children, I have yet to meet one like you, boy. How dare you trespass here? This is no place for you to be idling in. Hiranmaru snarled as he made for a lunge at the hat, but paused at Toshiro's raised hand. I will allow you to see into my mind, hat. However, speak of my origins or of who I really am, I will not hesitate to silence you. The captain threatened, his teal eyes glowing with promise. Do not mock me, boy. I reveal none of my conversations to no one, not even the headmaster. Your secrets and your presence shall be hidden with me. Nodding in their mutual agreement, Toshiro lowered his hand as he opened his eyes in the conscious world to find the professors looking rather worriedly at him, only to be interrupted by the hat who had seemingly finished and pondered over his decision. You are daring, have nerve, and brave, even to the point of recklessness. Godric Gryffindor would be proud to have you in his house. However, you are also a prodigy, one of the youngest ones at that, one that Rowena would be fighting to have you into hers. Yet, you possess the cunning and tactician of a serpent, adding to the fact that you are a pureblood. Salazar Slytherin would indeed welcome you as well. But loyalty bounds you to your subordinates and family, to which Helga would undoubtedly allow you in her own house. Oh, how hard it is to place you, Hitsugaya. How very difficult indeed. Do you have a preference for a particular house, boy? Quote. No, I am indifferent as to what house I am placed in. Toshiro replied mentally as the hat nodded begrudgingly. Very well, then. It shall be. I'm afraid that our conversation must be placed in a temporary close, Mr. Hitsugaya. As we must introduce you to Hogwarts. As Dumbledore made a motion for the boy to accompany him in apparition, having put away the hat, Toshiro held up a hand, confusing the professors. I am more than capable of apparating myself, headmaster. Toshiro smirked, as the boy apparated followed by the yells of the professors, only to find themselves before the noisy dining hall, the doors before them, the captain perfectly fine and whole, unlike other young wizards of his age in appearance if they attempted the same. Extraordinary. McGonagall breathed as she turned to the captain, her eyes glowing with fascination along with the other professors. Never before have I seen a student-learned apparition in such a rapid rate. Have you conducted this before, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. If you should know, Professor McGonagall, this is my first time in practice. I had purchased the textbooks for my years following having finished the texts given to me. The captain merely stated as if he had done some bedtime reading out of boredom, which in context was what the captain did. Although I am still in the middle of confronting the faceless. But that is a 6th-year spell book, Mr. Hitsugaya. Professor Sprout cried, astonished by the boy's intellect. My daily homework was nothing in comparison. Toshiro merely shrugged, as Dumbledore cleared his throat, his eyes conveying a message that all of the professors and the captain replied with the same sentiments, as Toshiro did not miss Professor McGonagall walking out to the entrance of the school. Later. With a burst of the doors, the 6 of them entered. Silence enveloped the dining hall as all of the students took in the arrival of their headmaster and the heads of their respective houses with the exception of Gryffindor, an unfamiliar professor, and most odd of all, an unnamed and most unusual student by their side, who regarded the lot of them with a rather relaxed stance, his expression rather bored and eyes cold and steely with high guard. But the students could not be more wrong. Despite his outward mask, the ice captain was tense, his teal eyes taking in all and everything, from noting the 4 long tables signifying the respective houses to the rather realistic night sky above them, making the captain wonder if he could manipulate the magically induced ceiling with his powers. Seating themselves at their table, the headmaster regarded the older students with the professors by his side, Toshiro having told to stay by the doors of the entrance. My apologies, students, for our tardiness in arrival. But all shall be explained when the first years have arrived. As if that assured all of the confusion, the students resumed their noisy interactions, Toshiro frowning slightly as the doors burst open once again, revealing Professor McGonagall followed by a small crowd of first years, who, as the captain grudgingly admitted, were about the same height as him. When I call your name, you will come up and I will place the sorting hat on your head to sort you into your respective houses, where you will join them at their table. Professor McGonagall instructed the first years, as she glanced the captain's way before turning to the unrolled parchment in her hands, until soon enough, the captain watched as the last first year stepped up and the hat placed upon their head. After a short silence other than the conversation of the said hat, the sorting hat shouted with a hearty yell. Ravenclaw. Silence overcame the room as the applause for the first year faded, all eyes turning to the last student to be sorted, who had his teal eyes half-lidded lazily, as if he would rather be anywhere but here. The dining hall was rather stifling. Standing from his seat at the head of the table and walking down to his pedestal, Dumbledore smiled down at all of the students, their attention turned to him. I would like to welcome all of you to New Year at Hogwarts. And to you first years, as headmaster, I too, you all welcome. The headmaster began as he waved a hand to his left. First, I would like to welcome all of you to the newest addition to our staff, Professor R. J. Lupin, the new defense against the dark arts teacher. Good luck, Professor. The said werewolf professor standing and bowing slightly at the polite applause. To add, our care of magical creatures has requested and granted to retire to spend the rest of his life with his remaining limbs. Dumbledore continued, the sentence causing several first years to widen their eyes in surprise. I am delighted to announce that our very own Rubeus Hagrid shall take his place. Cheers mainly from the Gryffindor table roared over the polite applause from the other tables as several students stood to cheer for the large man, who tipped the table slightly as he stood in midst of the applause. Wincing at the thought of the man being the teacher of the subject, the captain resigned himself as he reasoned it was better than having Kenpachi or Urahara. The thought of that was just downright terrifying. And lastly, I would like you all to welcome Hogwarts' very first transfer student in history, Mr. Toshiro Hitsugaya, who has come from Japan to learn our ways of magic and culture. Dumbledore gestured as he beckoned the captain forth, who ignored the whispers of his hair and eye color, stopping by the headmaster's side. Mr. Hitsugaya was sorted in Gryffindor, having been sorted in private within my office earlier, which explains our tardiness, and so I bid you all to welcome him with open and kind arms. Then with a wave of his arms, the tables filled with enormous piles of foods, from a tall platter of chicken wings to bowls of chocolate pudding which the children nearly dove for. Having taken his seat, on the edge of the table, rather away from his fellow Gryffindors, the captain held back a disgusted snarl. As the captain eyed the surrounding food rather warily, he blinked as he found the plates in front of him were Japanese, from soba to grilled eel, a wooden set of chopsticks for him with a simple bowl of white rice. Catching the eye of the headmaster, the captain nodded a thanks as he merely sipped a mug of green tea, noted by Harry, Ron, and Hermione, as the three of them seated themselves in front of the new transfer, who merely rose an eyebrow, blatantly ignoring Ron's barbecue sauce-covered hands. "You could have just told us that you were a transfer, Hitsugaya," Harry said as he bit into a slice of garlic bread. "That would have explained why Snape and Flitwick were escorting you when I saw you at the Leaking Cauldron. It was none of your business, Potter. And to add, you were going to find out in either case." The captain shrugged nonchalantly. "YWDITH Justith tells USTH. Ron slurred with food in his mouth as the captain turned to him, his eyes cold and filled with annoyance as he replied with an icy glare. "I thought I had informed you already, Weasley. It is none of your bloody or revolting business." Just as the redhead was going to retort, he began to choke as Harry patted the back of his best friend, as the hall silenced, the attention turning to the headmaster, who stood once again at the pedestal. With a wave of his hands, the feast dissipated, the captain raising an eyebrow at the action. So Hogwarts was effective, to an extent. Before we dismiss you all to your dormitories, I would like to say that Hogwarts is to play host, by the request of the Ministry, to the Dementors of Azkaban, until further notice of such a time as Sirius Black is captured. They will be stationed at every entrance. And while I have been assured that their presence will not disrupt our day-to-day activities, a word of caution to you all. Dumbledore announced, his voice dark and serious as the students listened with a tense stance. Toshiro narrowed his eyes at the mention of the Dementors, noting to ask Professor Lupin of the topic, seeing as the man was able to repel these hollow-like beings, as Dumbledore continued. Dementors are vicious creatures. They'll not distinguish between the one they hunt and the one who gets in their way. Therefore, I must warn each and every one of you to give them no reason to harm you. It is not in the nature of the Dementor to be forgiving. Toshiro glanced to the spectacled boy across from him, his green eyes filled with an obvious fear of the subject on Dementors, as his two best friends eyed their friend warily as they all turned back to the headmaster's words. "But you know," Dumbledore added, his voice tinged with flickers of hope. "Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light. Only if one has the ability to do so, Dumbledore." Toshiro thought cryptically, as he stood to follow his house to their dormitories, giving the trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione a glance before dismissing them. Then will they be able to defend themselves? You are pursuing a futile future if you are simply placing faith on this little boy, Dumbledore. Considering how he is housing something in his soul. Chapter 5. Research with a side of breakfast. Toshiro sighed for what seemed to be any number above 1,000 over the course of the day as he followed Hermione behind Professor McGonagall, who had come to fetch the two of them shortly after they had entered the common room. After having to endure the voice of rather fat Greek-robed woman attempt and fail, he would like to add to shatter her glass with her melodious voice, only to submit to breaking it with a swing to the marble behind her. The captain had had his fill of this wizarding world and the creatures in it. Then the painting had the audacity to brag about her achievement. A glare from the fatigued and sleep-deprived captain and the painting quickly shut herself up with a gulp and allowed them entrance. Noting that the moving paintings seemed to be implanted with a faint ryotsu, the captain concluded that the paint used to have constructed the paintings must have been edged with magic, as he entered the common room. Covered with tapestries of gold and red, the large room consisted of cozy couches, warm armchairs, rich brown and beautifully carved tables, and finishing with a warm and roaring fire that seemed to brighten the room. Toshiro absolutely hated it. It was too goddamn warm and too stuffy for his liking as the two dragons rumbled their agreement. But his hatred for the room was short-lived as Hermione approached the captain with an excited glint in her eyes, informing him of McGonagall's request to see the both of them as if it were the best thing that happened to her. Holding back another sigh, the captain turned after Hermione, who seated herself in one of the seats of the headmistress's office, the captain following in suit as they both turned to face the stern professor. As both of you are aware, you have applied to take extra courses of arithmancy, ancient runes, Muggle studies, along with the accompany of your regular courses of transfiguration, divination, care of magical creatures, and defense against the dark arts. McGonagall explained as Hermione turned to the captain with wide eyes, happiness in her eyes. Hitsugaya, you are as well? I thought that I would take all these classes by myself. Quote. You never asked, nor was it ever your business, Granger. Toshiro said with a shrug as he silenced the girl's open mouth of an incoming bombardment of questions with a small glare, which McGonagall rose an eyebrow at with curiosity before continuing. Having taken such a number of classes, Professor Dumbledore has vouched for the two of you that the both of you were responsible enough to be entrusted with the appropriate items for the both of you take these classes. I trust that you will not betray the headmaster's words, McGonagall said as she eyed both of them with a small glare, which Hermione nodded vigorously in response as Toshiro merely nodded, unfazed by the glare. Very well. The Transfiguration professor conceded as she turned from her desk and with a wave of her wand, floated two golden necklaces, one landing in front of Hermione and the other, Toshiro, who eyed his with scrutiny. The necklace was consisted of three small chains that unraveled was consisted of a single chain, and at the end of it was a small hourglass held in place with a thin gold ring. A time turner. Toshiro muttered softly but loud enough for the two other occupants of the room to hear, as Hermione widened her eyes in realization and Professor McGonagall nodded her head in acknowledgement, no longer surprised by the captain's perceptive eyes and intellect before she spoke. Yes, Mr. Hitsugaya. Since the usage of the hour reversal charm is too unstable for us to allow you to perform on a daily basis, the Ministry has decided to allow you the usage of these time turners. However, these are only to be used for your classes and them only, or these shall be revoked and therefore, as will your classes. You are to discuss this none but each other if needed, but otherwise, will not be tolerated. Do you understand, Miss Granger and Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. Yes, Professor. The both of them said, Toshiro's being later than Hermione's instantaneous one, as the captain had seen to close his eyes in the midst of the professor's words, having hearing such commands more than often in the past 100 years. Politics was written all over this. Just like the Ministry had a hand on everything magical, the Central 46 had a hand in all of the affairs of Gote 13 when those seeded bastards had never taken a single foot into battle. To use this item, you must wrap the necklace over yourselves and turn the hourglass as many times as you are to go back in time, the limit being up to 5 hours. Then spin the hourglass, allowing you to see as past events pass by you, but do not touch or say anything in the midst of this happening. Once the hourglass comes to a stop, you are in the time you have desired to travel to. However, once there, you must not allow anyone to see you, especially yourselves. Countless students have caused the ministry to have to fix the mishaps over the years, and with all that is going on, I believe we do not need any more trouble. McGonagall explained as she gave each of them a look, which they responded in suit as she dismissed them to the dorms, time turners wound around each of their necks. It was then Hermione could no longer hold her curiosity no longer as she began her questions, irritating the captain as he complied, having made the girl wait long enough as they walked to the Gryffindor towers. Having entering his designated dormitory, Toshiro found his cohorts each in their pajamas, eating jelly beans that seemed to make them act oddly, each designating as a differing object or animal. Childish antics and candy. Two of things the ice captain hated. Great. Perhaps you should join them, Master. You must play along with them, remember? The ice Zanpakuto teased, his voice colored with amusement and toying. No. I'm supposed to pose as one of them. It never said I was supposed to get along with them, less upon the thought of playing with them. I don't play, Hirinmaru, such antics are for children such as them, which I am not. You appear as a child though, Toshiro. Your point? Toshiro huffed as he internally glared at the dragons, who rumbled playfully at the captain's childish retort. My appearance may be one of a child's, but mentally and physically as a soul reaper in comparison to a human, I am old enough to be these children's great-grandfather. That may be so, Master, but the fact remains, you, in terms of Shinigami and rank, are young, therefore, at least try to act your age, in terms of your physical appearance. And you're supposed to have fun. I can think of far more productive things to do with my time than to eat jelly beans that make me act like a complete and utter simpleton. I forgot, Master. Forgotten what, Hirinmaru? You have absolutely no idea how to have fun. Toshiro huffed under his breath as he made for his bed, which had his trunk and Konohana's cage and the Maud Owl herself, who was doing what her master was wanting to do. Sleeping, not listening to the two laughing dragons which were accompanying his inner world. Slipping off his school robes and scarf, the captain pulled thin light blue pajamas, the silk expensive and embroidered with his division number in kanji on the back as the captain pulled out a small silk bag, pulling out his wand at the same time. Ignoring the looks from his dorm cohorts who had curled into their respective beds, Toshiro merely waved his wand, and followed his motion. The drapes concealed the teal-eyed boy as he summoned Counting the Faceless, having wanting to look up upon the Dementors from his trunk. The thought of the cloaked creature set a grim line over the captain's lips as he found his pursued topic unfold before him as he began to read. The Dementor is a non-being and dark creature, considered one of the foulest to inhabit the world. Dementors feed upon a human's happiness and cause depression and despair to those near. They can consume a person's soul through an act called a Dementor's kiss, which is executed when a Dementor pulls back its hood and clamp its jaws around the victim's mouth, consuming their soul. This is considered to be punishment worse than death, as the victims are left in a vegetative state, empty shell that are still alive but gone. It is speculated that the soul is trapped in the Dementor upon consumption. By this point, Toshiro could barely keep himself from roaring in anger. How long has these creatures been running amok and swallowing souls in Great Britain? Did these wizards have any idea what chaos they could cause Soul Society if they were to allow these creatures to exist? Calm yourself, Master. Such actions are yet to be needed, as we do not yet know if these wizards are controlling these creatures. They must have some level of control over them. The captain noted as he allowed his anger to subside slightly. Dumbledore did mention that the ministry had ordered them to guard the entrances of the school. Yes, Master. But they do not seem to be loyal enough as to protect the one they are to protect and to do away with the ones they were ordered to do away with, only loyal to the ones which allow them to feed in the greatest extent. How fickle. Toshiro spat, as the two dragons growled in agreement as the captain resumed the passage. Dementors suck all the light and happiness from the air as they draw long, rattling breaths, causing darkness to enclose in around their victim, making them feel incredibly cold. They are able to glide without a sound, and are sentient enough to taste and sense fear, drawn by the positive memories of the victim they intend to feed off of, forcing victims to relive their worst memories as they feed. Merely being in the presence of a Dementor for too long often drive their victims insane, as many prisoners are in Azkaban, CPG 682 for more information on the wizard prison. I swear these wizards are becoming more of a nuisance rather than a threat to anyone as far as I see it. Toshiro snapped mentally, as Hiranmaru rumbled in agreement as Sephiroth merely observed. Yes, Master. However, they are proving to be driven by emotions rather than reason and logic. After all, they do not ride by the laws of Soul Society and are as strict as we. Perhaps not, however, placing their faith upon a 13-year-old boy to save them from a dark wizard who was deemed as all-powerful is not an excuse. You are a child as well, Master. By Shinigami terms. I have lived for a near century, having seen more bloodshed and mangled things that would make even the bravest of these wizards cringe in fear. And to add, I have been trained and mastered what I am expected to do. A schoolboy trying to save the world? That's an express ticket to get yourself and others killed in a heartbeat. They are frightened, Master. They would be willing to do anything to believe that the threat of Voldemort is dead. Seeing as none know where he is. That is still not an excuse. Besides, I have a feeling that Voldemort is not as they believe he is. Do you inquire that he is a bigger threat, Master? No, not as of late. However, dark wizards are not to underestimated, Hiranmaru, no matter how stupidly prideful and arrogant they may seem to be. There is a reason as to why these wizards have turned to a mere child for their salvation. Indeed, what in the world could this wizard have done to have made them be so feared to even say his very name? How cowardly of them. The captain scoffed as he continued to read. The only known defense against Dementors is the use of the Patronus charm, an immensely complicated and difficult spell that evokes a partially tangible energy force known as a Patronus, or Spirit Guardian. But be warned, reader, a vast majority of witches and wizards are unable to produce any form of these Patronus. Such a conjecture is considered a mark of superior magical ability. To be successfully be cast, one must muster the sole happiest memory they can and began to draw circles, all the while saying the incantation. The following page continued with an instruction upon the conjecture of the Patronus, often taking up the form of an animal and differed upon the wizard or witch. Having deemed that such was enough for the night, the captain felt a worried feeling overcome him, only to be drawn away by Hiranmaru who hummed in his master's mind. Rest, Toshiro. I shall awaken you when it is the dead of night to report. Thank you, Hiranmaru. The captain thought back as he felt himself slip into his inner world, Hiranmaru hovering protectively over his master as Sephiroth rested by his side, eyes filled with admiration for his newly accepted master, as he slumbered. Do you see it now, youngling? Hiranmaru rumbled as he morphed into his humanoid form, his protective hold over the boy almost overly so as the Western dragon too morphed into a humanoid form as he nodded in response. Sephiroth had silvery white hair, tinged with an icy blue as his eyes were so as well, his face conveying the same as his elder and master, emotionless and rigidity of icy nature as long bangs fell over his fringe. He appeared no older than 16 or 17, hair tied to a high ponytail as he was dressed in black under silvery but lightweight armor. By the now young man's side was a thin but deadly blade, its hilt embellished with spikes and glistening pearls what seemed to be gleaming a tinge of blue. The blade itself was bone white, its tip tinted with a menacing and eerie ebony. "That is the darkness that dwells within my master," Hirinmaru continued, seating himself by the captain. "He is cold and emotionless, however, it is a mere mask. A mask he had worn for so long that if broken, he too will shatter. He is his element, young one. Fragile yet cold, soft yet the most powerful, merciless yet kind. For one so young, he is a living contradiction." Sephiroth smiled softly, as he gazed over the slumbering captain. Toshiro appeared younger in his sleep, his frown lax and furrowed brows no more. In their stead, was a peaceful and serene child's expression, filled with ignorance and obliviousness. "But it is his duty and his position," Hirinmaru said, his voice bittersweet. "My master is one of the ones responsible his world, to lead a battalion of several hundred men effectively, and earning their respect and admiration all the while. And with his appearance and intellect, it was hard-earned. He has never been what he is, Sephiroth. A child. However, it is that which makes him strong, elder." Sephiroth echoed as the soft snowflakes danced over his hair, forming a delicate crown as Hirinmaru merely nodded as they both of them allowed their master to his rest, allowing only dreams of peace color his subconscious vision. The ice captain stood in the outskirts of the grounds of his new temporary home, his Gigai instructed to sleep and no more as he made contact to Soul Society. Starting with his lieutenant. Sending a wary glance to Castle crawling with the hollow-like dementors, Toshiro made a mental note to be at least several hundred miles from the school when doing his reports. The last thing he needed was a bunch of those vile creatures going after their wrong target for a quick meal and needing to explain to the ministry how their dementors had magically disappeared. Almost snorting at the thought, the ice captain hesitantly flipped open his soul phone, and reached to brush his lithe fingers on the buttons, when the said phone began to ring, its call insistent. Startled, the captain placed the phone upon his ear, instantly regretting the action. "Taicho!" The speaker cried into the ice captain's ear, the said boy grimacing as he responded with just as much vigor. "Matsumoto. What is it now?" Quote. "Taicho. How can you do that to me? No one will give me sake now. Taicho's so mean and cold. I had to get sake from Hisagi and Kira. It's all Taicho's fault." His lieutenant whined as Toshiro felt his veins begin to bulge. "Ho!" Toshiro breathed in mock calm, as he wore an irritated smirk. "So that's how you've been sneaking in sake in the office even when I threatened the bartenders." There was a nervous silence from the lieutenant as she began to string a log list of denials and excuses of being needing sake to function properly and to fulfill her duties. "Speaking about your duties," Toshiro interrupted his lieutenant. "Did you do your paperwork?" Quote. Heh. Taicho. About the paperwork. The strawberry blonde woman giggled nervously as he could see her surrounded by the said paperwork, all undone. "I'm allergic to paperwork, so I put up a candle and it fell and kinda burned most of the papers. But I got it under control. Bye, Taicho." Quote. Matsumoto. Quote. And with nervous giggle, the lieutenant hung up as her captain did the same. An irritated scowl spread over his face, muttering about how much paperwork he would have to do when he got back and how he was going to murder his lieutenant when he got back. Slipping the phone into the hidden pocket in his haori, Toshiro eyed the school of magic with suspicion as he allowed the cool fall breeze envelop him. Sirius Black. Dementors. And that Voldemort to add. All to be given the world salvation through the efforts of an orphan boy who had not even aged past his childhood yet. Sirius Black, known to be the most notorious of Voldemort's followers and so happened to be Potter's godfather, adding that he is one who had caused the murder of the Potter family. But something was strange. Dumbledore seemed rather grim and saddened at the mention of the criminal on the loose, as if something terrible had befell the criminal and unjustly so. Do you believe him to be innocent then, Master? Sephiroth questioned, the Ice Captain and the White Dragon having exchanged vows of loyalty to one another as dragons, upon the captain's waking. It is merely he does not appear to be one who would sow such actions, Sephiroth. Toshiro said as he recalled upon seeing the wanted poster. It displayed a struggling man with long scraggly ebony locks over a handsome yet unshaven face, his eyes colored with madness. I have seen men with murderous intent, sadistic pleasure, and bloody psychotic, and this man is none of them. Could they have the wrong person then? Hirinmaru joined in. I would not put it past these wizards, Master, to convict the incorrect person. Shall we confront him? Sephiroth said, as Toshiro shook his head. No, we need more information upon this Sirius Black to confront him. Then of the Dementors, Master? Hirinmaru inquired as the captain glared darkly at the black beings floating over the castle grounds. They are our main concern. I doubt that Head Captain will take the facts and information I have sent to Soul Society lightly in my report. They are too close to Hollows for comfort. Toshiro said harshly, his voice laced with a hint of anger. These Dementors have existed and yet we had no idea. Just how many souls had gone this Dementor's kiss and have suffered like this? Calm yourself, Master. We are to continue our observations as well. Hirinmaru soothed his master as Sephiroth growled in agreement. And we cannot accomplish this if we are to destroy our cover. Nodding his agreement, Toshiro allowed his anger to subside, yet simmering under the surface. And of the Dark Lord? Sephiroth questioned, his voice colored with interest. This wizard was after my time, and seeing how frightened the wizards are of this being must powerful. Toshiro almost snorted as Hirinmaru agreed with his master in a growl. This Voldemort is only another supercilious bastard who believes that all are below him. I doubt his followers even much to him, along with the lines of those who follow him out of fear. And believes after defeating the wizards, he would have the world to his bidding. Ridiculous. But? Sephiroth inquired, sensing an addition to this conclusion. Is there something that troubles you, Toshiro? Toshiro merely narrowed his eyes as he stood from the grounds as the sun began to rise, signifying the morning. We shall continue this for another time. The Ice Captain dismissed the matter as the two dragons conceded, well aware that if they pressed it would reveal nothing. With flash of Shunpo, the white-haired captain disappeared. After removing and replacing the imperturbable charm upon his drapes, the Ice Captain entered his gigai, dressing himself in the newly transformed uniform, finishing his appearance with his teal scarf, no even bothering with the cloak despite the incoming chill of fall. Waving away the charm with a silent mutter, the drapes receded silently as the snoring of his fellow cohorts echoed in the enlarged dorm. Making sure that his things were locked away and secure, the captain made his way into the dining hall, exiting the stuffy common room, his movements silent and as lithe as a cat, his footsteps soft and would have put the most graceful ballerina to shame. Having able to navigate his way through a mental map from his readings from Hogwarts, a history, Toshiro met with an empty dining hall with the exception of Dumbledore, who drank a goblet of what Toshiro could not identify. Smiling at the entrance of the captain, Dumbledore spoke, his eyes twinkling with surprise. "Why, you are up early, Mr. Hitsugaya. Is it difficult for you to adjust to the time frame, perhaps?" The headmaster asked, taking a sip of the golden drink, that Toshiro had an inkling, was sweet. "I am trained and was entitled to awaken early, headmaster," Toshiro merely stated as he nodded to the man as he seated himself in the corner seat of the Gryffindor table, filled with breakfast foods, warm and toasting. Reaching to spread a small bit of butter upon a slice of toast, the captain ignored the concerned and saddened look from the professor as McGonagall entered with Snape in the stow, both as stern and prim as ever. Curtly nodding to each professor, the captain promptly chewed his buttered toast, ignoring the sideway glances from the professor's table until the silence was broken by the eventual entrance of several students, the morning having aged. "Mr. Hitsugaya, in the East, may I ask what teachers there are in your society?" Dumbledore asked pleasantly enough as Toshiro narrowed his gaze for a fraction of a second. "I must ask you to retain your calls of curiosity, headmaster. However, I will answer with this," Toshiro warned, cold teal meeting twinkling brown. "My society is a secretive one. We do not allow strangers, foreigners, or even those outside our ranks within our society. It will be advantageous to you to remain ignorant." And with that, the conversation had ended with a few shooting ominous glances. It was not long until Toshiro was met with a perky Hermione and sleepy Harry and Ron in the tow. "Good morning, Hitsugaya," Hermione greeted happily, holding several textbooks in hand, as the two boys mumbled the same. Nodding in response, Toshiro merely reached for the teapot, pouring himself a cup of Earl Grey. The tea was citrus and its aroma was unfamiliar, but it was better than the other vile teas that were almost as sweet as honey. Almost cringing at the thought of sweets, Toshiro frowned at the scent of maple syrup, as he turned to find the trio devouring pancakes. Potter and Granger at least had the decency of mannerisms upon the table, but for Weasley, the captain could not say the same. Syrup covered the said redhead's hands and forehead, mouth open for all to see, the cave's contents mashed away into a sickeningly sweet pulp as the golden brown syrup dripped from the said cakes. Turning away from the disgusting sight, the captain found a fidgeting boy seated in front of him, seated by Harry and Ron respectively as Hermione sat on his left. Ignoring Hermione's scoldings at Ron's table manners, Toshiro studied the boy before him. He was scrawny, and wore a pitiful and nervous expression, one that Toshiro knew well. It was a naive and innocent look, one that he himself once wore a long time ago. It was a look that invited others to step upon, and allowed them to do so with feeble and even little defense. The boy had a round face and a medium build, however, his pitiful expression only made him look vulnerable. And easily pushed over. Soul Society would have wiped that expression right off the boy's face. The captain had seen it too many times to count, only it was to morph into a hardened expression or a fear-filled corpse's expression on his new subordinates. "Hi. My name's S. Neville," the boy stuttered out, as he chewed a slice of jammed toast in his mouth. "Neville Longbottom. Hitsugaya. Toshiro Hitsugaya. A pleasure to meet you, Longbottom," Toshiro replied curtly, his voice cold but colored with a hint of remorse. "Is there something wrong?" Quote. Flinching at the captain's tone, the boy nervously spoke, only to be interrupted. "I was curious, Toshiro. It's Hitsugaya to you, Longbottom," Toshiro unconsciously snapped, having to do so often with a certain orange substitute Soul Reaper. Sorry," Neville immediately said as he cowered at the captain's snap. Waving it away, Toshiro turned away from the boy to meet with McGonagall approaching him. "Ah, Mr. Hitsugaya and Mr. Longbottom. Here are your class schedules, she said, handing them slips of paper. And if you would be so kind as to relay the others to Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, and Miss Granger as well. Nodding, Toshiro glanced over his own, handing the rest for Neville to pass to the others, Hermione stealing a glance at the captain's schedule, confirming that it was exactly like her own, the time frames of classes overlapping. Oi, my own. Yours and Hitsugaya's schedules are all messed up. How can you both take defense against the dark arts and arithmancy at the same time? Ron asked confusedly, having swallowed before he spoke, saving the captain and Hermione from a spray of pulped food particles. I will say it once more, Weasley. That does not concern you, Toshiro said flatly as Hermione waved the subject away. That's not important, she began. What do you think of Professor Lupin? Quote. He seems friendly enough, seeing how he protected us from the Dementor, Harry replied, setting down his goblet. But I'm just hoping that he would be better than the last two. Not likely, mate. You know what everyone says about the job. It's cursed. Ron piped in, before taking another bite into the cakes. Just like Professor Quirrell and Professor Lockhart, Neville added, his voice nervous and soft. Cursed? Toshiro echoed as he directed the question to Harry, seeing how Hermione would only give him details in which he had no use for and Ron would cover him with pancake debris before making it halfway.
It's the job we mean that was cursed, Harry explained as Toshiro rose an eyebrow to continue, although he was already briefed the stories of the previous 2 years of adventures that the three of them managed to entangle themselves into, as the oblivious, chosen one, explained. HMN. Toshiro merely hummed in response. It seems like the three of you like to stick your nose into other people's business, don't you?
Quote.
Blushing at the captain's words, the three of them hastily ushered their new charge to their first class, being care of magical creatures and arithmancy for Hermione and himself. Judging from the four others' faces, they were looking forward to Professor Hagrid's class. Cringing at the thought of creatures, the captain begrudgingly followed, beginning his first day at Hogwarts.
Chapter 6. First day of school. Toshiro stood aside from his fellow house cohorts as they were ushered toward their tall and rather hairy professor, his smile hidden under his long beard. There was a silent tension in the air as the Slytherins were ushered as well to join their rival house, a particular blonde only aggravating the atmosphere. Potter. The white blonde spat disgustedly as he faced Harry, who glared darkly. Is it true that you fainted in the train? Quote. Shove off, Malfoy. Ron spat back as Hagrid addressed the class, silencing the smirking blonde. The blonde held an air of arrogance, his gray eyes cold but still youthful, his complexion pale with pointed handsome looks. Wait until my father hears about Dumbledore allowing this oaf teaching classes. The blonde, which Toshiro assumed was Malfoy, sneered as his housemates laughed in agreement. Shut up, Malfoy. Harry snapped, his green eyes glaring as he stepped toward the blonde, who whistled in mockery, smirking arrogantly as a crowd began to gather, having handed his satchel to the boy on his left as he made way towards Harry. Suddenly, a frightened look pierced Malfoy's face as he cried out, Dementor, Dementor. Quote. A flash of fear covered Harry's face as he turned along with everyone else other than the captain, who had seated himself on a gnarled tree, only to realize it was a trick, Malfoy and his housemates roaring with laughter. Harry looked about ready to bash in Malfoy's sneering face when Hagrid interfered, clearing his throat for attention. All right. Open your books to page 49. I have a real treat for you lot today. The half-giant hollered, as the students looked at him with confusion. Don't I already have enough idiots to deal with on a daily basis? The captain growled internally as the two ice dragons rumbled heartily, grinning at their master's annoyance. Honestly, Matsumoto, Hinamori, Kira, and Hisagi are already a handful, not to mention Madarame, Ayasagawa, and Abarai to the list of idiot lieutenants I look over. Why do I have to take all of the stupid and annoying missions? Ignoring the laughing dragons in his head, Toshiro opened the monster textbook to many surprise. Several monster books were bound with belts, while some looked as though they were bound with almost anything the students could use to seal the books. One even had several yards of twine tied over it. Hitsugaya, how did you open the book? Harry asked, eyeing the opened book in the captain's hands warily. I merely commanded it to commence its struggling. It is the monster book of monsters, so naturally, it behaves much like any animal would. Therefore, only ceding to authority or a higher predator. Toshiro replied coolly, turning away. Are you stroke its spine? Then it's as sweet as a singing bird. Hagrid added, as he took one of the books and stroked its spine. With a small shiver, the book opened widely, struggling ceased. Oh, of course, stroking its spine. How could we have missed it? The blonde Slytherin shot sarcastically, his voice dripping with contempt. Two large and rather stupid-looking boys snickered behind their blonde leader as he stroked his belted monster book. Muscle lackeys without a doubt. Screaming and yells were heard as the captain turned to see Neville sprayed on the ground, his robes nibbled and hair unkempt as he was attacked by his monster book, as his cohorts snickered at his torment. I cannot believe I was once one of these idiots, or on the verge of becoming one. Toshiro snapped internally as he picked up the growling book, ready to attack its master once again. What a positive way of looking at your early death, master. Perhaps it was a good thing that you perished early in your youth. Hush. Toshiro silenced his Zanpakuto, Sephiroth laughing silently as the monster book in the captain's hands froze, the saved Neville looking up at him with awe, the captain merely raising an eyebrow over his stoic mask. Be more confident and believe yourself, Longbottom, Toshiro said, only loud enough for the two of them to hear. Or else, people will step all over you like a doormat. You are not stupid nor thick-headed as those buffoons who laughed at you, so, I suggest you get up. Not daring to cross the emphasis place on those words, Neville quickly composed himself, brushed away the dust over his robes and caught the belted once again monster book as the captain walked away, his steps so silent it would put Peeves in pure jealousy. Wait. Neville called out, as he caught up with the captain, who had seated himself away from everyone else at the gnarled roots of a large oak, the monster book opened. I just wanted to thank you, Hitsugaya, for helping me back there. You're welcome. The captain drawled out, not looking up from the book. How are you liking Hogwarts so far? Neville asked as the captain looked up with an irritated glance. I believe we are in class, Longbottom, despite being outside the classroom. Thwart your attention to Professor Hagrid, and not my experience in Hogwarts. Toshiro scolded Neville lightly, his tone commanding yet comforting as the boy nodded as they both turned to the half-giant, still waving for stragglers to come closer. Tada! The half-giant presented, his arms outstretched toward a creature that made all of the students freeze in a mixture of confusion, awe, and fear. Even Toshiro's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the creature. Meet Buckbeak. Ain't he beautiful? Quote. Buckbeak was a creature that appeared to be a half-horse and eagle, the eagle part being its front legs, wings, and head with the horse being its hind quarters. Buckbeak's beak was curved and black, its orange eyes glistening with pride and honor as it watched the fearful students, its fearsome talons digging in the dirt. Buckbeak's feathers ruffled slightly as it neared the students, still rather transfixed as the captain had regained his blank look a split second after it broke. Now, the first thing you gotta know about hippogriffs is, they're proud. Easily offended, they are. Don't never insult one, cause it might be the last thing you do. You wait for the hippogriff to make the first move. Then you walk towards them, bow, and wait. If he bows back, you get to touch him. If he doesn't, Hagrid explained, trailing off in the end as he pondered how to put it lightly. Well, let's just hope it doesn't get to that. So, in other words, show respect or be ripped to shreds. Toshiro thought as he could see the fear spreading within the students. Not as mindless as a creature a majority of these magical beings are. I agree, although I cannot say the same for a certain ice dragon. Hirinmaru teased. Surely, Elder, you are not referring to me? Sephiroth cried indignantly, his voice in mock hurt. Oh, you hurt me so. Be silent, both of you. Toshiro snapped, irritated as the two dragons obliged though playfully. And to think both of you are an extension of myself in a way. His external expression blank, Toshiro watched as Harry was chosen to pet Buckbeak, his indignant glance to his friends and housemates, having singled him out. With Hagrid's guidance, the boy managed to approach the hippogriff and even pet the creature, having earned its loyalty and applause from the class other than Toshiro and sneering Slytherins. As if seeing Harry having had a comfortable sense with Buckbeak, the half-giant professor lifted the boy, despite his protests, and off into the sky the hippogriff went with a screaming Harry in the tow. Pulling out a roll of parchment, the captain began to construct his report when a soft voice sounded beside him. Hitsugaya, if you do not mind me repeating, how are you liking Hogwarts? Neville asked, his tone cautious and soft. Sighing, Toshiro paused his action. If you really must be informed of my impression of this magical facility, Longbottom, it is fascinating yet disappointing. It is significantly different from my society, lenient and filled with second chances. In the aspect of the West's practices, it is different and interesting. But the spells and jinxes are only either practical or deadly. Which I find, to sum up in a word, vacuous. How are things in your society? Neville asked, slightly offended by Toshiro's account of Hogwarts. You said that they were significantly different? Quote. It is none of your business. Toshiro shot coldly, irritation growing in his voice. My society in comparison to yours, Longbottom, is like comparing hell and heaven, in your terms. It is, therefore, none of your business. Noting the finality and the hint of irritation at the white-haired boy's voice, Neville quieted as he watched with his cohorts Harry land with Buckbeak, a large smile and unkempt hair spread over his face as he neared his friends, applauding his safe return. Scoffing at Potter and his friends, Malfoy neared Buckbeak dangerously, not following the instructions given by Hagrid, Toshiro narrowing his eyes at the blonde. Yeah, you aren't dangerous at all, you big ugly brute. The blonde sneered, as the captain watched, his face expressionless as Malfoy's face contorted into one of fear as Buckbeak was startled. With a deadly claw, the hippogriff made a swipe for the backing Slytherin, who rose an arm to defend himself, moving too late. However, before the claw connected, a cloud of dust erupted from the scene, obscuring all from seeing what was going on with the hippogriff and Malfoy, Hagrid and Harry finally breaking from their frozen states, diving right into the cloud. Running forth to join their professor and cohort, the class followed, Neville taking up the rear, not noticing how the captain had disappeared. Allowing the dust to clear, the students found a disheveled but unharmed Draco sprawled on the ground, spouting curses of some bloody chicken. Turning to the assumed bloody chicken, the class blinked surprisingly to find the creature seated and calm, rather than agitated or angered, seated by a familiar white-haired transfer, who turned with a raised eyebrow at the class. Malfoy is unharmed, as Buckbeak has not touched a shred of his being. Toshiro began, his voice stern and hinted with slight irritation as he regarded to Hagrid, who turned to him with expressive surprise. However, I suggest you take him to the nurse, Professor Hagrid. We do not want to be neglecting the complaints of a student, no matter how trivial. Snapping out of his trance at the captain's cold words, Hagrid regained his composure. Rewrite. Turning to the whimpering blonde, the half-giant picked up the Slytherin and walked toward the castle, dismissing the class as he strode toward the castle. With a swift turn, the captain gave a glance to Buckbeak who, to the class' surprise, bowed to the transfer nodding in acknowledgement of the creature, turning away toward the castle, when Harry's voice sounded. Hitsugaya. How did you stop Buckbeak from attacking Malfoy? When did you get there? How did you get there so fast? The class watched with silence, as if it were a crime to break it, gazes transfixed on the back of the white-haired transfer. With a chilled and icy voice that seemed to travel up all of their spines, Toshiro turned slightly, enough for the class to glimpse his cold and stoic teal orbs. My reasons, methods, actions, and past are none of your concern, Potter. If you wish to inquire, I will be unable to ensure your safety and your well-being. And with a lazy turn of his head, the captain continued his way to the castle, his footsteps graceful and so soft that even the tread of the grass was unheard in the whistling late summer breeze. Seating himself at the corner table of the room by the window, the captain surveyed the room as other students entered, all oblivious to his hand-pocketing the golden time turner, carrying their cauldrons and textbooks. The class was shared by Slytherin, and seeing the exchange of silent death glares, this was not going to go well. But the captain merely shook the thought away. They were children, after all. The classroom was similar to a dungeon, the towering cabinets of differing ingredients hovering over the rectangular work tables for the students, chains dangling menacingly as a murky cold atmosphere added for effect. The cool air calming his being, Toshiro turned to find Hermione appear next to him, slipping her own time turner under her cloak before anyone saw other than the captain. Oi! When did you two get here? Ron bellowed from behind them, his blue-green eyes wide with surprise as Harry mimicked his friend as Ron turned to him. Did you see them come in? Quote. Shaking his head in response, Harry turned to Toshiro who merely looked at him with a bored gaze, his bangs obscuring one of his teal eyes slightly. Hermione already have buried herself in a textbook. Unable to hold back the involuntary shiver from meeting gazes with Toshiro, Harry could not help being on guard when regarding the white-haired transfer. He appeared to be at most a first year and yet he held an authoritative air that demanded respect and intimidation in despite his youthfulness. And adding to the incident in the morning with Buckbeak, the creature had bowed to Hitsugaya first, and the transfer had responded with a mere nod and glance, and yet he was regarded more respectfully than Hagrid. Shaking away the uneasy feeling, Harry exited his thoughts to find everyone staring at him. Blinking at the attention, a voice that Harry knew all too well sounded, its tone as degrading as ever. It seems that you have other affairs that are more important than my instructions, Potter. And seeing as you have Weasley to assist you, it appears that the two of you are made for each other as the failures you both are. Snape sneered as he neared their desk, their glares glowing as the Slytherins snickered. 5 points each from Gryffindor. Protesting looks colored the two boys' faces, but a warning glance from Hermione shut up them promptly as Toshiro merely watched with no change in his gaze, turning his attention to his brewing shrinking potion that Snape had assigned them to brew. Adding the sliced caterpillar with a swift plop, the potion simmered in the cauldron, glowing a brilliant green. Cleaning up the knife and stray daisy root debris, Toshiro blatantly ignored all, until Snape's irritated voice removed him from his thoughts. Longbottom, you fool. Did the instructions not state only to add 4 rat spleens into the cauldron? Professor Sprout has informed me of your vast knowledge of herbology, yet you were unable to do a simple task of brewing a simple shrinking potion? Useless. The poor boy shivered under the berating, his eyes wide with fear and shame, as Toshiro felt a tinge of sympathy for the boy. But not enough for him to interfere. With a prompt turn, the potion's master had chosen his next victim. Potter and Weasley. Potter, I expected as much from you. Snape scoffed coldly, his piercing ebony eyes regarding the two boys with obvious distaste. Unable to properly dice your daisy roots and even stir your potion as directed in your textbook. Pitiful, Potter, seeing as your father was unable to do any better, we should not expect as much from his spawn. And you, Weasley, I do not recall that the recipe for the shrinking potion was to melt your cauldron beyond recognition. I will be sure to note your failures for today's exceedingly difficult task. Snape finished, walking from their table with a wave of his robes, glares from the insulted boys in his wake. Huffing at the insults given to the students, Toshiro found himself under the scrutiny of the potion's master, who glanced at his perfectly brewed shrinking potion and merely walked off, as he sent a sneer Hermione's way, who looked at the professor with glum agitation, turning to the captain who had begun to do his paperwork. Huffing with indignant air, Hermione, too, pulled out her arithmancy homework, as Toshiro merely allowed himself a smirk as he had the assignment done and sealed by the time Professor Septima Vector had dismissed her class, delighted that for once she had a competent student other than Hermione who were able to make sense of her assignments. Setting down his quill, the captain sighed as the sound of arguing from a certain blonde Slytherin and a spectacled Gryffindor exchanged death threats, the former having his arm in a sling, having claimed his arm was severely injured. Scoffing internally at these wizards for the umpteenth time, the captain merely wished he was back in Soul Society. Placing down his textbooks and writing utensils upon the table, the dining hall cleared to be used for students' use as they wished, Harry threw himself on the table, face weary with Ron following in suit with his best friend. This is getting too hard, mate. Ron whispered as Hermione looked up from her essay for ancient runes to flip a page from the text. I swear, Snape and McGonagall are out to get us if they give us more homework tomorrow. And we don't even know if Professor Lupin is going to do the same. Considering you only do work and attend class for less than 10 hours, Weasley, I would say you hardly do much of, if at all, any work. A cold voice drawled as the trio snapped their heads to the white-haired transfer, who did not look up from an essay of his own, only his was near completion. Oh? Ron said in a mock-knowing tone. And I suppose you do more work then, Hitsugaya? You white-haired midget. Eyes narrowing at the insult, the captain spoke, his voice condescending and soft as the redhead stiffened, only the four of them able to hear. That is none of your business, Weasley. However, I would strongly suggest you refrain that tongue of yours along with that childish anger. If you snap and flick your tongue recklessly, you may find that very tongue ripped from your very lips, Weasley. Along with the very fact that you have completely taken a presumption that I am as narrow and shallow as you are, and so far, you have not made my opinion of Western wizards any better, but certainly less. You have no right to throw such presumptions upon my origins nor my appearance, If that was so, I would have disregarded that your existence. And with a swift movement, the captain returned to his essay, leaving a stupefied Ron and an angered Harry and a puzzled Hermione who tried to compose a retort to defend Ron, only to come up empty. That was a little harsh, Master. Hiranmaru echoed into Toshiro's thoughts as Sephiroth too voiced his concerns. Yes, Elder speaks truly, Master. What you had said was cold even for one such as you. The boy meant no harm, Toshiro, seeing how he probably did not even truly mean his words. Perhaps it was merely exhaustion speaking.
Perhaps I was a tad too harsh.
Toshiro mused as he recalled his own words. Ouch. Okay. I may have bruised his self-esteem maybe a tad. Try a floor, Master. Hiranmaru suggested playfully as Toshiro growled internally. Besides, you are posing as a child, who are which they are, you cannot expect them to treat you as they would a professor or an adult. They view you as a child, so a child they have and will treat you. I am not a child.
The captain growled out as he rolled up the finished essay, tying the large roll of parchment with a teal ribbon.
I am old enough to be Dumbledore's father, not to mention these children. But appearance and Shinigami-wise, Sephiroth trailed off, the acknowledgement he received being a low growl as a nervous voice pulled the captain out of his thoughts. Hitsugaya. Quote. With slow glance, the captain opened his right eye a crack, the teal orb colored with slight annoyance. What is it, Weasley? Quote. Fidgeting in obvious discomfort, Ron regarded the captain with a mixture of frustration, annoyance, and guilt, the majority being the latter. Judging from the stern expression from Hermione, she had probably argued in his defense, however, begrudgingly, guilt-tripping both boys seeing how Harry held a shameful expression himself. Myone said that you probably stressed from coming here by yourself. And that we should not bloody judge what you and your methods are until we fully understand them. Whatever that means. Look, mate, trying to say that I'm S. I have heard enough. Toshiro snapped, as he opened his eyes, his glare expressionless with slight annoyance. I know what you meant, Weasley. Therefore, I do not require an apology nor an explanation. Perhaps, Granger's words are correct, as I may be feeling cross, being away from home. Allowing a light smile to alleviate the tension, the captain received just as relieved smiles, although they were comparably larger and prominent, as Harry spoke up. How much work do you have to do at your society, Hitsugaya? You said that you did more work than the work given here at Hogwarts? Harry asked, setting down his quill. Before the captain could answer, owls of varying shades of brown flew overhead as they tossed their packages and letters to their respective owners, as the captain rose an eyebrow in question. It's mail time. Ron simply as if it had explained everything, but it was sufficient enough for the captain as he merely nodded in response. A flash of white darted past the students as the white owl set her numerous packages on the table softly, perching on her master's outstretched arm. Blinking her greeting, Korahana cooed softly as Toshiro gave her shreds of jerky he had saved for her, before turning to the packages she had sent him, his expression contorting to an annoyed one. Matsumoto. The ice captain spat in Japanese as he opened the second largest package, revealing a large stack of unfinished paperwork. You even have Lieutenant Eyes and Kiraku to help you. Quote. Harry looked at the captain in confusion as Hermione and Ron mirrored his expression, none understanding Toshiro's irritation. When the said transfer turned to Harry, his expression blank with a hint of suppressed annoyance. This is the work that I have to do hourly at my society, Potter. Wait. You have to do all that by yourself hourly? Exclamation mark. Ron cried aloud, catching the attention of others, whose eyes widened at the sight of the stack in front of the transfer, who merely nodded as he opened the largest package. Now, the students surrounding the four looked at the transfer in great envy as the said transfer merely looked at the contents of his package with a sigh of exasperation. Sometimes, the other white-haired captain was too much. And this was one of those times, seeing the assortment of sweets in front of him. Wrapping the sent paperwork in a bundle and stuffing the 4 letters, the ice captain gathered his things and stood, walking off without even glancing at the package of sweets. "If you would be so kind as to assist me with disposing of these sweets, Weasley, Potter, and Granger. I for one have no care for sugary foods. I will be turning in for the day. It is merely for Hitsugaya," Hermione insisted as she grimaced at Ron's greedy eyes glowering over the cooing chocolates. "You will not be joining us for dinner?" Quote. With a soft pop, the captain disappeared, his answer to the question obvious in his wake, ending the captain's first day of school.
Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. Apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See ya next time.